Hi, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman, and on this stream we build Django applications and work through how to get an app online on the internet. I'm working through a project to make a journaling service. Every line of code that I'm doing for this project is streamed live, so you can check it out live if you're able to join me, or you can check out the playlist later if you're catching this on YouTube. Feel free to ask me anything about Python, Django, or web development. That's what I'm here for. And we'll continue on this project. Last couple streams, I've been doing a lot of DNS work. We deployed the service, we got it live, but we had to make sure that it was talking nicely to the rest of the world. Part of doing that was making sure the email worked, both outbound and inbound, and that involved a bunch of DNS configuration. I think we're over the hump on that. I'll come back and describe a little bit that I needed to do to finish that off because we got stuck last time, and I figured it out off stream. But the plan for this evening is to continue on with this launch milestone, everything that's needed to actually make the service work fully for one user, which I will be the first user for the application. And then after that, start adding features so that other people can get in, go through payment collection, subscriptions, all of that sort of stuff. There's a lot left to do, but we're well on our way. So let's talk briefly about where we left off with the DNS configuration, then we'll jump into the new bit, which the new bit this evening will be about actually persisting journal entries on the receiver endpoint and making sure that we connect some data that gets sent out from the actual sending side and gets connected back so that we're able to correlate what we're seeing both outbound and inbound. But first, the DNS discussion to close out the loop. Last time we were doing this, we had an issue where we could send out email and it could be sent from the management process that was running the command that will loop over all the active users and actually send out their daily prompt. As a reminder, if you'd never seen the stream before, this project that we're working on, this is part 14 of the series, is a project to do a journal, but do it via email. So the idea is you receive as a user a prompt every day that contains a previous random entry that is your hook to like motivation to want to come back to your prompt and actually read what happened in the past. So that gets more and more interesting the more content you have in there. But then all you have to do in order to actually integrate and work with the service is to reply to the email, which is pretty cool. So that means that email is a pretty integral piece of this, and we have to get all of that processing working. So we had the outbound, the message to somebody's email client working, and we had that all configured. There's some sender authentication that we had to do with SendGrid to make sure that it was a trusted sending email address and so on. But there was some work that for the processing back when a user hits reply that we actually were having trouble getting that to show up back at the application, because what SendGrid will do is act as the receiver for those email responses, and then send it via a webhook and call back to our service. And for whatever reason, which I've now determined, it didn't seem like this part was happening. The actual email to SendGrid, there was no evidence that it was getting over to the SendGrid. So what I discovered in the interim is the problem. When we set up sender authentication, there was like an automatic mode, and doing that was configuring certain CNAME records of a certain record type in DNS. And by doing that, SendGrid gives you the ability to automatically update the credentials and stuff that are connecting to SendGrid and essentially making your connection to SendGrid more secure, which is good. But in that process, it left out certain types of records that I thought might be interesting. There's TXT records, which are part of DNS. It's a little way to add like metadata attributes associated with the domain. There's also an MX record, and let's bring that up. In fact, DNS. Well, thanks AdBlock. I'm glad you've been updated. DNS MX record, certain record type, and it's how to tell the DNS system of where to send email to what mail server. And so if you go with the not advanced route for SendGrid, then they give you an MX record, but it's still like a pretty ugly domain that you would use in the recipient, the to field of the email. And I want my emails to look like they're coming from journal ideally at journeyinbox.com. I found out that that's not quite the case, but it would have been journal at em9742 or something like that, .journeyinbox.com. And I didn't want that. That didn't feel right. What I wanted was a very human readable name, so it gives a nice experience. So in the process of configuring stuff, I went back to the automatic configuration and didn't mess with the TXT records and MX because I want that security guarantees. But then I needed to add, and this was the important thing that we missed, I needed to add an MX record in addition to the other configuration that I had. Just using the automatic configuration that SendGrid provided was only enough to make sure that the outbound connection was valid. I did ultimately find in the SendGrid documentation, this is probably more my fault than anything else, that if you get to the SendGrid page that describes the inbound parse, they do talk about adding that MX record, and we just, in the process of looking over all sorts of documentation, missed that particular page and that particular detail. So I'm not going to bother showing that DNS configuration. There's really no value to it, but now we have both the outbound emails and the inbound emails working. And I was able to confirm this last night and see that when I used my mail client and hit reply, I could see that it hit the webhook on our live service, which was really good. So that brings us to this actual last kind of step in the process. And there's a couple of aspects to this that I've been thinking about of how deep do we want to go and what maybe should we do before moving on here. So we have this step to persist a journal entry. And there are a few elements to persisting a journal entry. Let's bring up the model and see if we can make some sense of this. So here's our code over here. I haven't looked at this in a little while, but let's get to the right place. We want to go to the entries app and look at the models file. And let's close some of these other things to give us a clear view of what's going on. Whenever we create an entry, we're going to parse out the body of what was submitted by somebody's reply. And the data that we're going to get from our webhook is, I think, going to have all of that data already turned into the text that we need to capture. We need to actually look at that. There's some elements in here that I got to figure out how we want to store them. Like, what are we doing with new line characters? And does that make a difference? Does that automatically come in a normalized way? Yada, yada. There's some stuff here. The other element of this that we need to be able to do is there's twofold. One is we need to be able to look up the user via their email address, and we need to associate when. And there's actually, well, my previous statement, I'm not sure if is 100% accurate. We can look up a user in multiple ways, and we can talk through that. So I want to have the inbound hook that we have, which is under receivers, I think. This is a hook that is connected to our Django AnyMail configuration, and that is in turn connected to SendGrid and the response. So we're going to have this event here, and we'll have a message. And I've already done some logging and seen evidence that this does in fact work. It had my personal email and stuff like that in the subject line. So we can use attributes that are in here. But really, we want to be able to filter out if the webhook from my site has some basic authentication, but even assuming that authentication is not enough, it'd be nice to filter out any spam. So if somebody submits something that has nothing to do with their journal, we don't want to try and parse that out and store that. That wouldn't make any sense. And there's some other validation that we could do here. So let's chat through which pieces that we want. We need, like I said, that if this is the receiver that's going to be handling everything, this is where the actual storage logic could go initially. Maybe there's better places for it in the long term, but we need all of those attributes in order to make an entry. So we need to have, there was the actual content, the body. There was the when was the entry made, and then there was the actual user. So those three things. So where are we going to source each of these things from? Now the body, that one should be pretty obvious. It's gonna should come from the message. We have to figure out what field, because this message class is not really clear to me yet. I need to look at how we get the content out of that, and so we need to search for what field is it stored in, and what is the format of that field. Those are the two pieces that we need from that. And then we need to get the when. Now the when is tricky. The when, I've talked about this at length on other streams. There's some parsing we could do in a number of places, but hey, the Koga Alchemist, welcome. Thanks for joining in. The when has this aspect to it of we could parse it, but there's always that chance that the user could change something. Like maybe, the subject line that we send is something like it's October, or it's Wednesday, and it says October 18. How was your day? Or how are you? I think that's the prompt we did. So one strategy we could use is we could look at that subject line and say, okay, this is October 18th. So we know how to associate that for the when. But that gets pretty messy, especially if this is not a problem, but what if you're December 31st? Or is there a possibility of getting the year wrong? Like if we parse this out and we see that it's December 1st, but the thing that receives it is maybe the person submitted a reply to this, but they actually submitted it on January the 5th of the following year. So that would be 2024 for this year. But we want to associate it with the 31st of 2023. So if you're just doing parsing, I guess the point is if you're doing parsing of just the subject line, there's some tricky edge cases in here. So what would be better is if we could associate this with a more concrete date in a format that is always parsable. Like if there was a way to have, actually let's go back to the October 18th. I don't know why, but that just feels, I don't know. Let's just stick with that. So if there was a way that under the covers we could kind of hide in some metadata of 2023 10/18, then there's no ambiguity about that from programming. Like that's a very easy thing to transform into a date. There's just nothing that's going to parse incorrectly about that. So ideally, we would like to attach this kind of metadata to the message, and I think that we have a way to do that. And this is where I need to confirm this. The other aspect of this is who is the user. There are a couple of ways that we could do this. One is we know we have our user record in the database and we have the email address from them. So we could look at the event, I guess the from email, and look that up and see, does that match a user? Does this match some user in the database? If so, then we have a valid user and we can do that association. That's one way. So I'll call this option 1. Another option would be if we were able to have because remember we're trying to keep an association with a particular prompt for a particular day. So option 2 would be something like when we send the email. So when the prompt email is sent, and I'm using the prompt as this is the sender on the Journey inbox side, the actual worker process that's sending the email out to the user. When that's sent, SendGrid gives an ID back, gives a mail ID. So at that moment in time, without even referring to the user's email address, we know which user we were referring to, because the code that's doing the sending has to loop through all the active users and the active accounts. So if we stored this SendGrid mail ID and stored that in the database, and then we're on the receiving side able to look up the mail ID if there was an attribute that's like the original thread, and could see that that the reply maps to the same prompt email, then we have a very strong connection of we sent this because we know who you are, and you replied back to us being Journey Inbox here. So this has the advantage of, let's say somebody somehow picks a different from email in their client. Like some clients have the ability to switch who your from is from. And this was one where if that would happen, like the user would reply, they would think that they sent the email properly, and they would have from their perspective. But if we couldn't match the right address, then we would drop it on the floor, because we wouldn't find the actual user in the database. So I'm leaning a little bit more towards this one. But both of these things, this metadata and this ID thing, are things that I don't know where those will exist on the receiver side. That's what I need to explore. Like what is I want to be able to like log, I guess, the attributes what am I trying to say? I want to be able to log the attributes of the receiving and see everything that's in there. So now that's going to be tricky when it actually comes time to show you, because it's going to have my email address and it's going to be kind of sensitive. And it's kind of we don't have a great way to test this hook out. Like I don't think there's any way to trigger this without actually doing the email, which is sort of annoying. So I think that means that we'll have to do some source reading of looking at what's actually in the message, looking for where are all of the attributes stored that are related to SendGrid, and then finding out within those, does it have the original SendGrid mail ID? And then how do we get that back? So those are all of my thoughts on like, how do we actually piece all this back together? Part of me wants to do this second option for a secondary reason. And that secondary reason is having to do with reliability. We haven't really talked too much about reliability, but what happens if the worker that sends the prompt, that's supposed to send the prompts out, fails? Like maybe there's an exception, maybe SendGrid is down, and right now it'll be doing it in a dumb loop. So there's actually, if any of them fail, then the whole thing would fail. And like, I don't want to, block most of my users because one user had a problem. We can resolve that, but like in the earliest version, I'd like to be more robust than that. So if we did better tracking of the actual prompt sending and had a kind of a log of a persisted database log of here's every time we sent to you, and we know the message ID, then we can have a stronger correlation, and then we can backfill if we ever messed up or need to go back for some reason. So those are my thoughts on how to get all of this information, and now it's the matter of putting all of that together. And if you have any questions about that, let me know. I know there was a lot of explanation and brain dump, so if any of that didn't make sense, please holler. So I want to look over here. I have the am I in the right? Nope, this is Django. So in the wrong. Where am I? Yeah, I'm in the Django project clone that I have, so that's not where I wanted to go. So let's go back into Journal, and when I want to go into the virtual environment and go into Site Packages directory. So in here is all of the packages, and what I'm really wanting to dig into is Django Anymail. The Anymail package has all of the stuff that we need, and I want to dig into specifically the message, because I need to find out where is this extra stuff going to be set. And I think it's in this ESP extra thing. We can go confirm this with the documentation. Let's do that, in fact. Receiving mail. This is the hook we set up. Yeah, and then okay, here's some interesting warnings that we should read. Senders can spoof the from header. Yeah, that's like, so that's something that I was just saying. Like, we don't necessarily want to trust the from header. We'd like to be able to figure out other ways to do this. So it may or may not match the actual address. And I think I described, I don't know that I described the reason for why it might be legitimate, but they're correct. There are legitimate use cases for why you could change that in your email client. Most other fields in email can be falsified. For example, an inbound message's date may or may not accurately reflect when the message was sent. Okay, I can believe that too. That could be some processing thing, and we don't. It's important for the journal. You know, if I wrote my journal entry for today, I want it to represent how my day was this Wednesday. I don't want it to be like I happened to write it on Thursday and it got associated with Thursday or something. No, it's very important that time match up. I'm not concerned about attachments. I'm not going to look at those, so we're not going to do that part. So let's read through some of these things. The AnyMail inbound event. That's, I think, the first argument to the receiver. We have second argument. I don't think we really truly care about the sender. It's just how the event system works. But we care about this thing. So we've got that. That's the event field. And it's got an AnyMail inbound message. We want to read that type. The event type is going to be inbound because that's the one we're using. Timestamp, indicating when the inbound event was generated by the ESP. Okay, I don't think we want to trust this one. Nor do we want to trust the message date for the warning it just said. We're more interested in our own date if we can supply that. Event ID, I don't think that matters. ESP event. ESP stands for Email Service Provider, in case you're curious. It's not, ESP is an extrasensory perception, telekinesis, whatever. The raw event data from the ESP deserialized into a Python data structures. For most ESPs, this is either parsed JSON as a dictionary, or sometimes the complete Django HTTP request. This gives you non-portable access to original event provided by your ESP. Okay, so we can look at the SendGrid information to see if it's going to be a dictionary or if it's going to be a request. If it's going to be a dictionary, we can do some pretty print logging, which could be really useful to see that. Although we may not want it that way, but let's continue on. But let's file this away. Put that in the back of your head. That might be useful. All right, so then we have the message. So that's the event.message attribute. That's what we have here. So far, so good. The actual sending address of the inbound message. Okay, so this may be the person, but may not. The recipient, so that should be journey@email.journeyinbox.com. The from email, value of the messages from header. AnyMail converts this to an email address object, which makes it easier to access the parsed address fields. Okay. Okay. So it could be, I've actually looked up what is this thing called where you have the quotes and the bracket syntax. This is actually called a mailbox format, which I thought was really interesting. And I'm hoping we can use the mailbox format to set in our settings so that it looks like, right now when I get the emails, they say just journal in my email client, and I want it to say in a nicer way, like journey inbox journal as the from. And then you can pull out the address, the display name. Oh, that's cool. Neat. To CC subject date. The value of the message's date header. And a where date time. Okay. Again, I don't think we really want to trust this though, if we can avoid it. Okay, the message's plain text message body as a string. Huh. So we either want text or HTML. Like if it's a response, I think we want the text. But I think what we're going to store, I'm not going to do any formatting with this service. So the point of journaling is not to be, or at least the way I'm defining it, is not to be like flowery in how what you'd want to bold or italicize. It's to capture the text. So we are looking. So far it looks like the body is either message.text or message.html. That's what we're going to reach for. Don't care about attachments. Don't care about inlines. Content ID map. What is this? Dictionary mapping, inline content ID references, inline content. So if somebody happens to source something inside of their email is so weird, man. I'm going to ignore this. Spam score. I don't think I care right now. So I think there's going to be enough on here that we could filter out and not worry about spam in a bunch of other ways. Oh, interesting. Stripped text. Okay. Or maybe message.stripped text. I think we should. So I'm looking for things that we can log later that might be useful to see all of this stuff, and we can do a test email, see all of the attributes. Okay. You can use all of Python's email message features with an email inbound message. For example, you can access message headers. Okay, I don't think I need those message headers. Attached and inline content, we're not worried about that. And here's the function signature. Okay, and then let's read about this. If any of your signal receivers raise an exception, an email will discontinue processing the current batch of events and return a 400. Most ESBs respond to this by resending the events later. Okay, that's good. This is the desired behavior for transient problems. Maybe your Django database is unavailable, but can cause confusion in other cases. You may want to catch some or all exceptions in your signal receiver, log the problem for later, and follow up. Well, okay. There's time limits on these webhooks, so we don't want to do a lot of processing. Not a shock. And I don't think we need to worry about if your signal receiver function is defined within some other function or instance method, you must use weak equals false. Otherwise, it might seem to work at first, but will unpredictably stop. Okay. Ours will not be defined within some other function. Where did we define it? We put it in the apps area. So we have we have the function. It's just a standalone function, and then we connected it here. So this is not going anywhere. That function, that comment is about garbage collection. So if you made a function, since functions in Python are like anything else in Python, are technically objects at some low level, there's possibility that if there's nothing referring to it and it was of a lambda sort of thing, that the garbage collector could clean up the function. And that has to do with weak references and strong references and stuff. So we don't need to get into that. I think we're good with having this top level function we have in a module. It's not going anywhere. Okay, so I didn't see anything in the message that looked like specific content. This is the generalized instructions. So let's look at the SendGrid stuff. And I think here we get extra. This ESP event that I said to file away is probably what we're going to need. So let's go back to the receivers, and we want, and that was not on the message, that was on the actual event itself. So check event ESP event. So when we look at the code for AnyMail, we'll check and see if that is a dictionary or an HTTP request. Hopefully it's the former, because that'll be way easier to work with. All right, now let's check this out. Here's the information about SendGrid. We've already configured this stuff at the top, so we don't have to worry about the back end or these. Looking at this may be what we want. And I think I saw this actually on one of the messages that I checked in SendGrid. So let me click on this for a minute. Where are we? Oh, this is on the sending side. Okay, we got to pair these things together. So this is important we understand this. So right now I'm using the SendMail interface, and I think that's going to have to change. So let's look at our job. See, I'm calling Django's mail.sendmail. This is a convenience method that's a wrapper around some stuff, but another way you could do this is actually create a message object, and then I think after you've built it, then you call send on it or something, which is essentially what SendMail I think is doing under the covers. Actually, let's see if we can go to the definition, see if we can, this is clearly what happens or not. Yeah, more or less that's what is happening. So it's got this email multi-alternatives, and then it puts some stuff on a different can, and it calls send in the end. So that's kind of what we'll have to do, but we don't want to use the default Django class. Instead, what we want to have is the AnyMail message variant of this. And they've got a good example here. They say it's a subclass of what we just saw, but we can add extra stuff to it. And this, I think, is the important bit that that we want on this, is I want to take advantage of this metadata, most likely. And with that metadata, that's where I want to put in the prompt date, so or the entry date. I don't know what we'll call it. But essentially that string of the 2023-10-18, I would like to store that with the mail message, with the hope that by the time the webhook gets called back, that we will receive that same metadata. Now, there's a possibility here that won't work. There's a chance that the thing that I receive is not going to be the full set of messages. It'll just be the reply. And we will lose we might have sent the metadata up to SendGrid, but it's not going to get connected and then over into the receiver. So this is why I want to be able to like log this information and validate that what I'm hoping will connect up will in fact do that. Because if it doesn't, then we're going to have to get more creative. So we're going to be able to pull out the message ID, I think. Right? Sorry, I'm jumping around, y'all. Oh, okay. I know why. Let's get these up as separate things. Got two different tabs here. One's about SendGrid, one's about sending, one's about receiving. So our message ID is going to be the thing that we want to store, and we could actually store this if I said I wanted to store this stuff in some kind of database table. This is the ID that I want to be able to store in the table because I'm hoping that this is what comes back on the other side. Okay. We need to make a handful of changes and just do some. Maybe a cheap way to do this perhaps is to just try and do this logging. Make sure we get all the attributes, do a deploy, test it out, and check the logs and see what actually came back. The other way to do it is actually do a deeper analysis of the code and try it that way. So I'm feeling a little bit like it might be just worth hacking it out today. So we have the ESP, the event ESP. Let's do from pprint import pprint, and with any luck, Heroku will format this nicely, and we'll say print ESP event was pretty crude, but should work hopefully. And then I want to do event ESP event. We know those are attributes on this. We could do some annotation here that might help the type checker validate this. In fact, that might be actually pretty cool. So this is a anymail signals anymail inbound event. Let's say from anymail signals import anymail inbound event and put that on here. And I guess this is a string. We have the keyword arguments. Let's see if it does the detection now. Dot ESP. Yeah, cool. Okay, so that's not a full type check. Kind of don't care. Well, maybe I do care. I'm a little OCD sometimes. Let's put in, there's no return. The question is, what is the sender? It's the bottom, right? Sender class. One of the, okay. Boo. I really don't care. So let's indicate that we don't care by using the any type. So from typing import any. This is a not accurate type check, but it kind of indicates that it doesn't matter. Or that's what I'm trying to indicate anyway. And same with the keyword args. I don't really care what they are. Okay. So now we've added a little bit of type annotation here. What's going on with this thing? From email is not a member of none. Oh, must. Okay. I think the introduction of annotations has opened me up to the possibility. Yep. Okay. Boo. So that's good to know, I guess, that there's a chance that the message could be none. Fascinating. We wouldn't have known that if we hadn't added the annotation. That's what it was complaining about. I don't know why it would be none, but I guess it could be. And maybe that's just more spam or something. Who knows? Okay, let's get back to this. So we're going to print the ESP event. We're going to hope that that's a dictionary, so we'll actually have some useful information there. If it works the way we want it to, then we should see, and we add all of the metadata here, we should be able to see this stuff. And we should be able to see, well, we'll see a bunch. So let's do, what else should we be printing? Let's do all of these different variants because we want to see, let's say message.text was, then we want HTML and stripped HTML or stripped text. It's unlikely that we want HTML at all, but I'll just conclude it for completeness sake. And then let's print message text, print message HTML, and print message stripped text. All right. So far, so good. I'm going to comment this out. It might give us a fighting chance that I can actually show you the log data. Because if I include it, I definitely can't because it'll have my personal email address. That might come in anyway with the ESP event data, but maybe not. And maybe we could avoid that and actually see this stuff. Because when I'm going to send an email later, once we get going. Okay, so that is on the receiver side. We're now going to be, we've positioned ourselves to like look and inspect a bunch of the data that we think we want to use. And now it's time to actually go to the send mail side and change this code to be using that other form, and then try and add some attributes on there that that we can then hopefully see in that ESP event. That would be ideal. So let's look at the SendGrid variant here and see what we're supposed to do. They give us instructions here. We're going to get message IDs automatically, we hope. Oh, so actually... And email status. Yeah, that's the thing. I think this is one of these weird things that only like appears after you hit send. That's the strange part. All right, so over on the side, we want from an email that message import an email message, and an email, we need to check what fields it has because it looks like it's got subject, body, 2. I don't know what tags is. This okay. Need to inspect this. Attributes you can add to messages. Email looks for these attributes on any email message you send. You don't have to use any mail. Wait, what? Then why do we care about the AnyMail message type if it's going to get them anyway? That's confusing. Sorry, I'm jumping around, but I want to scan through these quickly. Okay, let's read through it. AnyMail normalizes several common ESP features like adding metadata or tags to a message. It also normalizes the response. There are 3 ways to use it. Just use AnyMail's added attributes directly on any Django email message object or any subclass. Create your email message using the AnyMail message class, which exposes extra attributes for the ESP features. That's probably the way I'll go. The first approach is usually the simplest, I guess. The other 2 can be helpful if you are working with Python development tools that offer type checking or other static code analysis. Well, we are doing some of that, so that sounds to our advantage. Availability of each of these features varies by ESP. There are additional limitations. Check for your specific ESP. So we're going to want to validate this against this docs later. All right, so I know for certain that we'll want certain fields here. We'll want AnyMail message, and we want to give it, well, we want this subject at the very least. Whoops. Oh, their strategy for using constructors is not to my liking, but okay. They've got all these different things that they attach to it, and then they derive from email message. We're now looking in Django, so to orient yourself, that's where we're at. The challenge, I want to be able to send both text email and HTML email, and that's not as obvious with this email message directly. So we have to make sure that we mimic the SendMail interface, which has handling for that. Look, if we go in here, the SendMail interface, there's HTML message right here. So we have to do this when we build out our message. That's a little different from just using SendMail. An alternative that gets attached. Don't think we need to use the connection. Did they use the connection in the example? No, they just called send. which is probably using the default connection. Oh, that's interesting. All right, so here we want to do, we'll call it mail. And comment out all this stuff. And then we want to do mail.attach alternative with the HTML message with the type text HTML, right? Where were we? We're in here. Yeah, text HTML. And then this thing, the second one there was actually the body. They're calling it message here, but if I think we go to the definition, it's body. So we want to call it body equals text message. And then the from email, I think, stays the same. Yep, from email is the same. And then the recipient list. The recipient list is getting passed on directly. And it's the fourth argument here. So the recipient list argument is actually called to. Okay. To. Okay. This is going to mess up our test code too. I think we have a test for this that was checking some stuff here, and well, I don't know. Actually, maybe I'm wrong. Test the job. Oh, what was it? Let's try it out. Oh man. Oh, I know why. We haven't called send yet. Cool. That's exciting. So that means, because we actually had a test, and you may not have caught this from if you weren't on a previous stream, but if we look at the test file, it's the job test that actually does the checking, and it looks at the mailbox and looks at the mail itself. And here you can see, so there's like parsing on this side. There's this out box that has a testing mode that doesn't actually send anything, which is very good. And then it's doing some assertion on that, and you can see it matches up with our expectations. And it asserted on all those things. So hooray. That gives me a pretty high degree of confidence that what is here will work properly. So we have, I think, successfully replaced our use of the sendmail version and can get rid of the sendmail call. Okay, by itself, that just looks like I made it more verbose when I kind of did. But we wanted to do that for the benefits now of using the AnyMail extras that come along with this. So there's this AnyMail status that gets added to the AnyMail. And that's where it's going to have our message ID. So I want to be doing the logging here. So actually, let's do some printing. Print. There's only one user, so I don't need to do an actual message here. We'll just put it at the start. We'll put sending prompts to active accounts. Gives us kind of something to visually see, hopefully. Although it should be pretty clear from the worker. There'll be like worker logs or something that we should be able to check out. And there's only one, like I said, there's only one account in here, so that's fine. We'll have a date, and this is the thing that we actually want to store in the metadata. But after we do that, and we'll put that before we hit send, but after, we want to be able to print the mail message. Nope. What was it called? AnyMail status message ID. And we'll just say, just to give it, make sure it's clear, message ID was. All right. Still passes, so the code's still working, or code's still running. The other bit out of this that we want to be able to is to do some storage stuff on the storing the date. So let's check out how we can do that. We've got the general sending page here, and we're already looking at the AnyMail message. So attributes you can add to messages. The message ID is automatically created. We've got that SendGrid setting. Envelope sender. I don't think we want to mess with that. Metadata. If your ESP supports tracking arbitrary metadata, you can set this to a dictionary of metadata. So this might be the area that we want to do this. On a message with multiple recipients. Okay, let's pause. Let's see if the metadata support is actually there in the SendGrid docs. So we've got generate message ID, merge field, which we're not using. API URL we're not going to use. To use SendGrid features not directly whoa. Sorry. Jumped way ahead. To use SendGrid features not directly supported by AnyMail, you can set a message's ESP extra to a dictionary. Your ESP extra dictionary will be deeply merged into the parameters AnyMail has constructed for the send, with ESP extra having precedence in conflicts. AnyMail has special handling. Okay, so let's try both metadata and ESP extra in case one works and the other one doesn't. Or where does this put it? SendGrid does not return any sort of unique ID. To work around this, AnyMail generates a UUID for outgoing messages, provides a custom arg named AnyMail ID, and makes it available as the message's status ID. But where does it store that, y'all? Does it get stored in metadata or is it stored in ESP Extra? Okay. We'll try both and we'll see what happens. So we have this side says metadata. We'll do mail metadata. Whoops. Mail metadata is equal to a dictionary. And we'll call it metadata key and metadata value. Very boring. And we'll do the same thing, but we'll substitute metadata for ESP Extra. That was the other one, right? ESP Extra. Oh. I might be misunderstanding this entirely. I think this is not needed. ESP Extra is like extra features that you would use on their API. Okay. So maybe we might need their API to look at the send mail API and see if there's a way to add metadata from there. Why didn't you send me to the right place? Didn't want authentication. Okay, try again. Send me to the right place. This link says it's going to take me to API reference web API v3 mail index request body. And then I get dumped in the authentication section? What? Why? Okay. Mail send. Mail send. Maybe it says the link is old. Okay, whatever. Quest body. So looks like, okay, so here we are, because it said personalizations and ESP Extra is one of the things they said is personalizations. So I think we're looking at the right stuff. So I'm looking for, can we add metadata here? Most of these don't look like they'd be useful for us, except for one of them maybe. Maybe this one, although it's a string. So I'm not sure on that. Personalizations is an array. There's a bunch of stuff in it. Push comes to shove, we could stuff this in a header. I don't know if headers are propagated. That's it'll be an interesting thing to check. But I was looking at this custom args thing. Custom args, values that are specific to the entire send that will be carried along with the email and its activity data. Key value pairs must be strings. Substitutions will not be made on custom arguments. So what? Total custom args size may not exceed 10,000 bytes. I'm wondering if the send grid in AnyMail will be parsing custom args somehow. Wondering if they have an example here somewhere. I don't see it though. Custom args sounds like put an arbitrary payload of data in here as like a blob. Which may work, but would be a bunch of extra parsing. So I think what I want to do is see if we can just try metadata, if that'll stick in there. And then we can see on the ESP event side what comes through to the other side. So in fact, let's go one step beyond here. And like if we have if I bring up this and do from date time import date, and then I did the string representation on date.today, you should see it come out in the format that we expect, 2023-10-18. And we've already got a date localized, but a today here. So at this step, we should be able to say entry date, that's the piece of metadata that we actually want to capture, and do the string representation on today. That would be the thing that we really want. Let's ditch this and let's run the test again to make sure I didn't get any syntax wrong before I do this deploy. We're still we're flying a little bit by the seat of our pants in some ways. What do we have? We have replaced our message sending with the direct message format. And you know what? I'm going to rename that. It's called an AnyMail message, not a mail. So let's be consistent here. Where we have mail, change it to message. Mail, mail, mail. Then one more. Mail. Okay. So check it again. Still runs okay. Let's look at it. So we're printing just the message ID. I guess we could add one more print in there just to complete everything. It shouldn't be a shock though, but we could print the message metadata. We know that that's going to print out this stuff. It's not going to be very exciting. Okay. So we've got our new message format. We've got the test that still proves it passes, so we have some confidence there. We've added metadata. We're also going to be looking at the message ID after the fact. And I can do a print here because Heroku is just, the app is just listening on standard out. So those will show up as log messages when we run it. I don't want to keep this stuff in there long term. It's really an inspection tool. It's a crude inspection tool because it seems the process of actually testing this receiver is a much longer loop than I'd like it to be, frankly. I wish there was better ways to test this. We could try and set up ngrok again, but that is a lot of work to do that. So deploying it when there's not a lot of traffic on here is a pretty cheap way to get what we're after. Down at the bottom here, we've got this other version where we're now printing on the receiver side and wanting to see all this data that we can find in here. And I did have one tiny little change that I'd made offline. I guess I didn't commit it, so I'm still showing every bit of code here. But I wanted to change the subject line as I was testing this out. I realized that this first part is a sentence, and then we've got the how are you as the second sentence. So I don't know why I chose to use a comma there initially, but I've changed it to be 2 sentences. So that's that bit. Okay, so let's commit this. And whoops, receivers line. Where are we? Really? Well, if you're too long. Wait, what line did it say it was complaining about? 12. That's not 12. This line. Fine. Okay. So we'll say add some email message logging for send and receive. Okay, and then I should be able to do a deploy from here. So we haven't hooked up the actual scheduler. And on top of that, we need to trigger the schedule of the sending manually. So what we're going to do after this is deployed is log into a Heroku shell and run the management command there. And we should see that print output of the metadata attributes and stuff. And that should go to this phone, in fact, because the sending will send to my account, which is the one that's configured for the site. But we should at least see the message IDs and stuff. And then we can copy those and keep them to the side. And then I can do a little bit of an email here where I will type out a sentence or two. I'll put in some new lines because we were interested in seeing what gets stored versus not. And then hit the send button. That should go to SendGrid. They should process it, call the receiver hook, and then the receiver hook will process that message and do the printing of all that extra stuff. That's the goal here. So let's do that. Looks like our deploy is totally done. So we want to go, Heroku run bash will get us to our shell here. And now I'm going to do run jobs daily. That's the trigger that will run all of our job stuff. And cool. You can see the date here is reading as 19. It's because it's on UTC, it's time. So let's take all of this information and we'll just copy it right now. Let's do a pure copy, drop it right in here. Because why not? That's fine. We'll indent some stuff and comment it out. And now we've got the raw data that we just saw. So when we're coming back to validate this, we can see that's the stuff we're hoping to see. Let me check my phone and see if I actually got my email. I'm kind of sad if I didn't. I do have an email. It says it's Thursday, October 19th. Again, UTC. So it's time to reply. And can't really show, well, there's nothing hiding here, but again, my camera doesn't, if I turn this here, it doesn't really show you anything worthwhile. So I'm going to hit reply and say this is a test and do a couple of new lines to give some spacing. And here is another paragraph, technically. Then let's do one more. One more paragraph. Okay. And it's going to go to journal@email.journeyinbox.com, and I'm going to hit send. And hopefully all of the configuration I did last night is still working. I don't know why it wouldn't. Okay, so it was pretty quick too. So it should be done by now. The challenge is I'm going to have to, let's get off here. We've already captured that chunk of information. So it's signing out of the Heroku shell. And at this point, I'm going to have to put it on the secrets mode for a moment, because this is where it'll be my personal email information details. But what I'm going to run is the Heroku logs command, Heroku logs with a -t for a follow. And this should bring up everything that we saw. Okay. Boo. Okay. Unfortunately, interesting. So I'm looking at the attributes here, seeing if, let's see if I can hide. Does this show, looking for information? Yeah, it kind of shows some sensitive information. So I'm going to have to continue to describe it here. Sorry. But we've got message.txt. And unfortunately, the message.txt includes both the actual text of the message. Well, you know what? Here, let me do this instead. I'm going to cut out the logs that matter, and then we'll look at this in a terminal in a not very sensitive way. And then y'all can see the content. So give me 1 second. I've got the app. These are messages from the app that I'm going to copy, and I'm going to edit some logs, insert, paste them all in. And maybe delete one line. No, there's nothing sensitive in that line. Okay. And then I'm gonna get off of there and clear this, and then bring this back. Okay. So let's take a look together and see what is in here. Unfortunately, is not nearly what I was hoping to see. The message has not only, okay, this is my email. This is right. This is good. But then it has also the reply as a raw text in the indented style. So that kind of sucks, because I was hoping to just see the reply content. So that's lame. The HTML version here is not terribly useful. It does show that SendGrid was putting a hidden tracking pixel in here. So that's what this thing is in the bottom. And then it ends. And then there was nothing in the strip text version. So that tells me that SendGrid was not doing any stripping of that. Sadly, the ESP event, they just recorded a raw WSGI request. So we're going to have to do some processing on that in order to see the values that we really care about. So we didn't really, what did we learn here? We learned that the text is more than we think. it includes the original prompt, which, again, it kind of stinks. I would like to see, maybe there's a little bit more that we can explore, breaking it down into its pieces. Maybe there's more structured content format here. So let's dig into this for sure, to know that if we're getting the right attribute from the message. And then also, how can we dig into the WSGI request and see if we can find those metadata attributes? Because if the ESP extra, or if the ESP, what they call that? If that's extra stuff, extra data is stored somewhere else, which we need to be able to get that out. Because they said on the receiving side, well, let me just read, make sure I want to make sure I understood this right. Maybe I was wrong. Yeah, the ESP event. Sometimes the complete Django object. Yeah. This is the part that I wish was not just a HTTP request, because is it a body that we have to parse out of there? Like, it's just there's a bunch of nonsense that I feel like we have to deal with because of that. But let's look through these other attributes to make sure I'm not missing it. Also, there might be, let's look at the message is an AnyMail inbound message. So we pulled out text out of this, but there could be other ways to get just that top message. Like there might be a way for it to parse that and try and figure that out itself. That might come from those Python classes, because I'd love to be able to say like, no, it's actually a series of messages. Just give me the top one because that's the reply. We might not be that lucky, but we'll check. A list of all inline content parts. That was AnyMail converts each inbound attachment and inline content to a specialized MIME object with additional methods. I think that's not what we want. I mean, I'm willing to poke at this later if we need to, because if there's anything that will give us a clearer content of just the reply, I'm all for that. It will mean, because otherwise we're going to have to figure out how some kind of parsing scheme to like chop off everything that is not the user's journal entry. That could get messy. So let's take a look at email message to see what it has on it. It's from the Python docs now. Okay. Looking at, there might be other fields on message that we want to actually print out. So it might be worth doing, printing a dir call on the message to see what other keys might be hidden on there that might be worth it. because it looks like it can behave mostly like a dictionary. Or just call keys, I guess. All the messages header field names. Get content type. If this is a multi-part, what are we going to be walking over? This might be coming back as a multi-part that we could then dig into. There's so much, this is a lot. I don't actually know a lot about this message class. Pretty new to me. Looking for ways that it might have extra detail that I can get out of here. So let's add in 3.4. We could do a walk on it. And then what does it return though? Iterate over all the parts and subparts of the message object tree. What is a part? Is that down here? Part. This class represents a subpart of a MIME message. It is identical to email message, except that no MIME version. So maybe we'll try walk and printing the parts. See what comes out. That could be interesting. But if we just print it, what's it going to do? It might just print the class name or something like that. The repr. So iter parts. Because when we called text earlier, I wonder what that was actually doing. Was it calling get body underneath? Because I don't think I saw a text up above. Okay, let's just make some guesses. That's the worst that could happen. And then we'll do another deploy. So we know we need to do some stuff on ESP event. That is going to have its own body so that we can print that body, and we could also print any headers that come along with it. Because it was a request, so that should work. And so let's do also print message parts, I guess. And that should be for part in message walk, print part. And then we said we wanted to also see the message keys, if there's anything interesting in there. So print or pretty print the message keys. And then finally, so this is not useful to pretty print the event itself, but we want to be able to pretty print. There should be header, that might be a tuple, but for header in event, ESP event dot headers. Print the header. And then we also, if it's a request, it's going to have a body. That body will be in bytes, I think. So we could do print event ESP event body decode, I think is, I might be off on this part, but if it's the last part and I made a mistake and we get an exception, okay, fine. Well, maybe it's telling me body not a known number of none. Okay. ESP event can be none apparently. So if we say if event ESP event is not none, and then indent that stuff. Why are you still complaining? Oh. Okay. It's not, there's enough type annotations here too where it's not complaining about body anymore, so I think I might have gotten it right. So the stuff at the top here is no longer valid. That's going to be for that other message. Let's go to that. So we're adding more content to stare at. So let's do archive that one so I can see the next one. We'll say refine receiver logging. And let's deploy it. Cool. Let's get into shell. And I'm going to run manage. Does it have a history? I was going to say, that'd be too cool. Run jobs daily. So now we've got a new little entry block that we can copy. Nice and confused here. Okay. And delete that stuff, we don't care. And leave it here. I've got the new email already. Going to reply. Test 1. New paragraph, couple new lines. Test 2. That should be enough. I think we saw that I'm not too worried about the new line, actual new line aspects of it. The text output made that pretty clear. It does have them. So I hit send. That is sent. It should go to the receiver now. And I'm going to go back to the secret screen because there's content I can't share there. And I'm doing Heroku logs-t. And what? Boo. All right, well, it's got a lot more content in here. So Oh, I must have a 500 going on right now because it's doing a 500. Boo, 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 boo. So it's what's happening is it's not printing the ESP event thing because I must have been wrong on what's available on that thing. So it was a WSGI request. I thought it would have a body attribute, and it turns out that's not correct. So I think what's happening right now is it's trying to send over multiple things. John, I thought you were using Postgres. I am using Postgres, sir. We should dig into that. Why it's using SQLite 3? I think, yeah, I don't know, John. I'll have to check it out. Yeah, so far what's happening, I think, is SendGrid is trying to do me a favor. It's saying, hey, your endpoint keeps giving a 500 here. You should stop doing that. So I'm getting a bunch of logs right now. So I should do it, like I should find the logs that are relevant, pull out the ones that we want to see. It's hard to tell like what's good and bad out of this. So I'm sorry, I'm staring at this for a little bit longer than intended, y'all. Okay, I think here's where it starts. I'm gonna pull this down. We can stare at all this output together. Copy this. I'm gonna come over here and paste it in that log file that we had. And we will I think it's safe to show this now. Hold on. Clear that screen. I'm gonna bring back all this, sorry. And what do we need to do? We need to temporarily, I need to remove or comment out this stuff because I got it wrong. So it hit here and then it blew up. So let's do this. This will make it so that we'll deploy this again. And then we'll make the webhook happy so that SendGrid stops bombing out. I'm probably also using up Sentry too. This was not right. Not correct logging. Okay, we'll let that run. I'm gonna bring back this stuff and we'll see what we've got. And John, I guess we can also, while that's running, it should, I wonder if this is just like, no matter what installs this. I think that's probably the case, John, to your comment there. Perhaps it's part of the Python build pack of SQLite 3, has some sort of compilation, because it's calling it out separately from my requirements file. So I didn't specify this anyway in any particular way. And I don't think it would like sniff that out from my settings file. I think it would just, I think it's probably just calling from the big build pack. You'd have to go look at the Heroku build pack code to see what it's doing there. Okay, coming back to this though. Let's go to the top. So we've got, stepping through each of these things, we have the raw text, which is this one. It's including the quoted thing with the prompt. And then we have the HTML version, which includes all that stuff, the raw text, along with the tracker here. We still have the stripped text being none, because we've said that the ESP doesn't do that, or it appears not to do that. Then we have our keys. This message ID is one is interesting. That might be. We should check out what that value is. So next time around, we want to do print message ID. That could be that AnyMail ID. Could be something else. Don't know yet. So that would be, this is like a dictionary, and we want to access message ID. Okay. Oh, you know what it is? This was a WSGI request, not an HTTP request, and this headers method is new to Django's HTTP request, I think. Check on that in a minute, but I think that's why it blew up. Okay. Hold on. It might be some secret stuff that I didn't realize was in the logs. I want to make sure it's not showing my email address. There's a bunch of stuff in here. Yep, there's my email address. Let's delete that line. Okay, I think I got the only one. Okay. Sorry about that. So what we're doing here is what we're looking at is we were just looking at the keys, and then we got to the parts. So again, this is a multi-part email message, and there are these MIME parts. And each one of them is like its own message. So I just wanted to go through them and see if one of the parts would just be the actual journal entry, or if it's going to look like something different. So, scanning through the parts, we've got, gosh, there's so much stuff here. Let me close this for a moment. Let's just look at it this way. There's some stuff here at the top, which is like all the metadata. And it might even include, I think I even saw that message ID thing in here, so we might not need to print that later. It might be something else. This might be the message ID. I don't know. Okay, but this divider, I think, is where the next part comes up. So we've got a content type part, but unfortunately, it still includes all of this. That's really unfortunate. I have some hacks in mind that we could use maybe as a way to filter this out, but that's sad. This is the same stuff that we saw in the message.txt field. And it moves on to this next content type part, and just the HTML version now, slightly uglier formatting. Don't know what all the equal 20 there stuff is. Some kind of encoding. Oh, look at this though. No, I'm sorry. I was getting excited. It's the same problem. So now we have a UTF version of it. What was that other one? It's also UTF-8. I wonder what the difference is. Because we've got this block here, but we also have this block here. They look the same. I don't get it. And then we got the HTML again. And then there's the end. So here's my hacky thought for how we can actually do this. It's going to be a problem if anybody decides to use the email address in their journal entry, but we could technically look for this entire string and parse out and split the content of, if you're above here, that's the original reply. And if you're below here, well, then that must be the prompt. I think that's what we're going to have to do. Yuck. So let's note that. Let's go back to the receiver file and Remy, welcome back. No problem joining late. Glad you're here. We are currently fumbling our way through trying to decipher the actual content that's received by SendGrid on the receiver on the app. And I'm looking for a few things, because we have to stitch together everything that is needed for the journal entry. And it's not the most obvious choice is not clear. I think we've established that strip text does not have what we want. So let's go ahead and get rid of that one, because it's just printing nothing. Also, the HTML version, not interested in it. There's nothing worthwhile there. So the note of message text, let's put some notes here. Message text contains the plain text and the prompt. We need to trim out the prompt. We could probably do that idea split on or trim all lines after journal at email.journeyinbox.com appears. That's imperfect. But a reasonably safe solution. Again, for that reason that somebody could, in theory, like say, I got this email from journal at email.journeyinbox.com today, and my breakfast was not good. Like, something silly. Not foolproof, but the chances of somebody doing that realistically are not very high. And if they did that, I might say like, well, okay, sorry. Don't do that. Maybe there are other ways that we could refine that even more. The more characters that we could incorporate in here, the harder it is for somebody to like accidentally include that. So still not impossible. Can I be your professor? Sorry, on my I don't have any plans for that. I appreciate the vote of confidence though. Okay, so we've got our keys. We'll look through those. There's nothing else in here. Before I clear this out and go back to the previous message, because I think it had something that I wanted to see. I'm looking at these things. We're going to try and print the message ID on the next go around. So I don't think there's anything we need in there. All this extra stuff, this is like googly things. Those are headers that are coming from Google, I suppose. I'm looking at any of these others. Could any of these others have stuffed in data that we care about? Don't know. Don't know for certain anyway. I still think the ESP event stuff is going to have what we want. We just have to do it correctly. Let me put the secrets back on because I think one of these undos is going to show my email. But I'm going to come back in here, and now I have the previous message. Yeah. Okay. What I wanted to show is that we have the WSGI request. So I think the docs were lying. Or maybe they're not considering all. Maybe they're not considering every ESP, because the docs here said that the ESP extra, where was it? Is it on receiving? This ESP event says it, or sometimes the complete Django HTTP request. If this was truly the case, if it was actually the HTTP request, I think what we did that was throwing up a 500 would have worked, because in the HTTP request there is, as of some recent version of Django, the headers field. Although I guess I used it for like a function, so maybe I just got it wrong. But I don't know. The fact that it tells me it's a WSGI request as the repr, I think the actual Django HTTP request would show that it's an HTTP request. In fact, we could probably verify that. Let's go. Manage shell plus. Do we have HTTP request? No. From Django.http import HTTP request, and then we could do a string of a new HTTP request. Yeah, so the repr is going to be HTTP request. So there's a difference here, and maybe it's subtle, but WSGI request is like a slightly lower layer. And so that's the attributes that are on that are going to be a little different. So let's look at that. Rami, I'm flattered, but I barely have time with my day job to do. Like this is something I'm doing late in the evening in my time, once a week, and I can barely manage that most of the time. So I'm not going to be able to do or act as a professor, but thank you for that word of encouragement. So we've got the WSGI request. This is like the underlying thing. Although that's interesting. It says it's a subclass of HTTP. So maybe I just called it wrong. Okay. Let's go check something out. Yeah, I screwed up. So this might work if we just correct how I called it wrong. I called it like a function, but it's not a function. It's an attribute. So let's try this again and see what we can get out this time. We're going to get rid of this stuff again because we don't need it. And I would like to actually have some confidence. I mean, we're making progress here in chipping away at the pieces that we need, but gosh, this has been harder than I would want. The message parts thing was not actually useful as far as I'm concerned. Like, I was hoping that a part that they would like separate the reply from the like prompt that was a quoted thing, but that's a deeper layer that they're not parsing into. Maybe there's some library out there that could actually do that separation intelligently, but I think I'm going to go with this kind of crude version of just splitting on whether we can find a line that has the email in it. So let's get rid of this part stuff because there's a bunch of extra stuff that we won't want to do. And then let's bring back this if statement and drop that. That's what blew up. It said, I was just looking at the Sentry entry, and tree sheds, welcome. We're looking at SendGrid output, trying to like hook up the journal service that I'm doing. It's receiving an email, and we don't have a great way to inspect all the data. So I'm doing a little bit of print debugging live on production. Sounds not as good as it is. Probably it's not the greatest thing in the world to do. However, there's no users, so I'm not too worried about it. Anyway, what I was saying is like my email from Sentry here says that we've got a type error. Oh, you know what? Let me see if I can log into Sentry and show us all here. That way we can look at it together. I'm not logged in, I'm sure, or maybe I am, but I'm gonna assume that I'm not logged in. So give me a second. I'll get logged in and see if I can bring up the exception. Logging into Sentry now, Sentry.io, and I am logged in. Cool. How likely am I going to recommend Sentry? I like Sentry a lot, sure. There, gave them my MSAT rating. Let me look at this page before I bring it up, because there's a bunch of details on here and I don't want to like overshare some secrets somewhere, because it could have a lot in here. Yeah, it's got my personal email, so I can only go so far. Spam report. Wow, there's a lot of information that we can get out of here without even logging more stuff. Hold on, let me dig into it a little bit. If I can refresh this page, maybe I hide where my email was. Yeah, cool. And then I want to look at more of this stuff. Okay, I think it's safe. Gosh, this walking on, it's a tricky part to like, I want to show you all as much as I can, but you know, I also don't want to leak all my sensitive data. There's a fine line to walk. Okay, and here we are. So we've got 4 requests in the last 24 hours because we exploded. I didn't test the code. It was my fault. I didn't have any test to run the receiver code yet. It would have exploded if I had just done it right then. But here we are with the hook and what I tried, the line that failed. And it says, well, show me more. Oh, here it is. HTTP headers object is not callable. So we need to take off those parentheses, and that should do it. Scrolling down, we've got some attributes that are here, some of the fields that will save us from having to like print those out later, because it was, I don't know, able to store some of this. Because it was, again, this is a webhook call that was failing. So this is a web request. We can see what was sent here, although these are not necessarily very interesting, because it's not about the message, it's about the webhook call. So yeah, probably not worth seeing there. I'm going to go ahead and mark this resolved because I did fix that problem with the headers. And we're back to no issues in Sentry. So coming over here, we now have let's save this stuff. Let's look at our output. This Harame, this is I'm using Mac. I'm using a Mac. Is it a Mac Mini? Yeah, I think it's Mac. It's an M1 Mac Mini. This is Mac OS. is what you're seeing. So we've got this note about what we want to get out of the message text. I've deleted the attributes that I know are of no use. We've got the message ID. I don't think that's actually going to be helpful, but hey, we'll try it. And then we're going to, the rest of this I hope will now work, because if we're doing this properly, I am pretty sure that there's a body attribute. Although I say that, let's confirm, because this would be a silly thing that I could get wrong. Yeah, there it is, body. And it's a byte string. So the reason I added the decode is bytes are encoded data. You can think of bytes as raw data. In order to print something, you want to be printing strings. The rough way to think of it. So in order to elevate your raw data, your bytes, you can think that's where the word, why it's coded. You decode it. You take it away out of its code format and you turn it into an elevated form of a string. No, it's pretty easy to get confused on decode and encode. It took me many years before it finally sank in. But bytes is code. Strings are something better than code. So you decode, turn it away from code. Hope that helps. Likewise, if you want to go and turn it into bytes, you encode it. Correction. All right. I think this is the right set of changes. And hopefully, now log with fewer code errors. Fewer. I can't type my message properly. I think it might be a sign I'm getting towards the end of where I can reasonably make intelligent progress. What I'm looking for here, after all of this, is I want to see that metadata. I want to see that entry date captured so that we can parse it out, whether that's in the body of this ESP extra content or some header somewhere. I gotta find that entry date so we can make the proper association between what was sent and the response, and to validate that the metadata that we sent on the outbound gets connected to the reply that the user actually did. Okay, so let's try this again. Let's go back into Heroku run bash, bring this up a third time. And from here, we're going to run jobs daily. Again, this should send an email out. So we've got all of our content, and we want to store that just only for the purpose of comparing it. That's why I'm not committing this stuff. Let's comment it out so Python's not super angry up there. And here, so now I should, at this point, that was safe, or that ran. So I've got a new journal. This time I'll reply with a different body in the message. So I'll say test 3. So my last ones were test 1 and test 2, and test 4 as 2 separate paragraphs. Let's send. Time to go for me to go fetch the logs again. And with any luck, it's not throwing a 500 this time. So I'm going to Heroku, and whoops, I'm still on the management shell. So 1 second. Heroku logs -t. And this time we got a 200. Great. Rame, I'll get to your question in just a moment. So this has my email address in it again, but maybe we're a little farther along this time. What is going on here? What is this stuff? Okay, I think I need to look at how do I get more of the Heroku logs here? Tailing the logs. But it's like not enough. Let's like cut some stuff off. So it's hard for me to tell like what part is what. Let's go. I'm going to log into the Heroku app here. And how do I view the logs on Heroku itself? Or is there a way I get more logs on my Heroku logs command? And I'm sorry, I can't come out of the other mode yet because it's showing my email address all over the place. So Heroku logs-h. I want the number of lines to display. Okay. Heroku logs, there's a -n option, and I'm going to say, let's just try 300, see if that's enough. Okay, cool. That was enough. So let me copy all this, paste it into a buffer, trim out my username, and then I can show you all the content again. Sorry, y'all. So I'm pasting this into my Vim, searching for my email address in a couple of places. Okay. And I think, well, I gotta go clear my screen over here. All right. Sorry about that. Yeah, Harame, I turned that screen off on purpose because I had some sensitive data there. All right, let me pause though. Let's see your question. So how much mathematics, such as number systems, set, statistics, do you have memorized in order to be specialized on Java, C, C++, Python, Django? Very little. Well, it depends on the kind of programming you want to do. If you're going to become a game programmer, like you're really desire to make video games, then ultimately knowing trigonometry is going to be really, really useful to you. So that's like one of the more advanced mathematics and I wouldn't even say trigonometry is all that advanced. It's certainly not like a multivariate calculus or differential equations or something like that. Set theory is useful for working, if you can do some basic set operations, but I don't think you need a whole class on that. I don't think you need to know, there's a lot of stuff. If you go read about the basic set types that are in Python, the set operations for ORing and ANDing things together, and read the docs, then I think you can get away with that for sets. Statistics would be useful if you're going to go into a data science role for programming, and you want to do science work related to, and pair that with programming. So, but in order to actually just become a productive programmer, I don't think you need any of that stuff. Frankly, I'm teaching my son, for example. My son is 11. He's learning the math you would expect an 11-year-old to learn, and we're doing programming, and he's doing fine. So we're doing some web stuff. We're doing some exercises on exorcism.org to teach him some Python. No hard math has been required for any of that. So hopefully that answers that question. Okay, let's take a look at this. I'm probably running out of gas for too much longer, but let's see what we got in here. So we've got our message text. I think we can stop printing this after this one. I don't know if this is actually teaching us anything anymore. So let's take out this. Our message keys remains the same. I don't know why I left that in. The message ID is this long thing. don't know the value of that. So let's drop keys and the ID. And now we're looking at the actual ESP event content. Let's see what's in there. I didn't print out, I should have done the items probably. So these are standard HTTP headers. That's what we're looking at here. Host, connection, all this sort of stuff. So maybe it wasn't that useful to see all these things. There's actually not a lot of request headers coming in for that hook. And this is a bummer. Okay, there's more in here. How long does this thing go? Got 210 lines. All right, so there's more in here maybe. I'm not going to be totally bummed out yet. So we went through all the headers. That was this one. And then we're doing a raw print on the body of the ESP event. I have no idea what this format is. This dash XYZZY nonsense. Like, what is that? I don't know. Some kind of weird separator? There's probably some, if anybody knows the encoding for this, let me know. Because that's pretty strange looking to me. Just doing a spam report. Cool. I'm looking for the metadata. So I guess maybe we should search for 2023. Oh, it's going to be all over the place. What do we call it? Entry date? Dang it, it's not in here. All right. Phooey. So I don't know how much it's even worth, like, digging into this stuff here. There's a lot of stuff in here, but I don't know that any of it's actually materially helping us. Like, I don't even see, what's the ID for this? We said B, this was the sending email, had B26F. Is there B26F in here? Nope, not in there. Crap. So, at least at first blush, unless there's more ways to send data to the hook that we're not connecting the dots properly yet, then I don't see the ways to correlate what we were hoping to correlate when we talked about the when and the user. We need those metadata attributes. It repeats the content in here in the body. So I guess that's what we're seeing. This is perhaps the full MIME type thing. Sigh. Okay. Not going to give up yet. We'll go at it for another 10 minutes or so, poking around. But, you know, we're learning. We're learning together here. Let's take a look at what we might, let's take some guesses at where we might get more information. Because we still have that custom args option as like a blob to send on this. Maybe there's something there. But I don't know how that would like pipe through again to the reply. It might just be only on the sent stuff, which isn't going to do us any good. We need the full round trip. The other thing that is, can we add headers, and how are headers propagated? Is there any propagation? Maybe we could search for. It's time to. I've been not relying on Google here, but maybe it's time to do this. SendGrid inbound parse track to sent email. It's going to be a hard thing to search for. Or how about inbound parse sent email round trip? Get out of here, Google. Stop it. All right. My brain is not in a spot where I can look at all this information and get it quickly. So let's stay a little more focused. I think what's going to happen, most likely, unless I find an obvious answer, is I'll need to do this research offline and try and see if there's tools that can do the full loop. So coming back here, let's take a look at it again and read through this ESP extra support. I think that's the only real tool that we might have. So, to use SendGrid features not directly supported by AnyMail, you can set a message's ESP extra to a dictionary. Yes, I do use Firefox as my browser, my preferred browser. And that's more of a historical thing, although I'm not crazy about Chrome these days. So there's a personalization things if you had multiple recipients, so you could specialize per people, but I'm going to be sending emails one at a time because each message is specialized to the person. So I don't think we need to use that personalizations. But the personalizations thing was just like special fields over and over again. Which included this custom args thing. It will be carried along with the email and its activity data. So, okay, maybe here's the search term that is interesting. Inbound parse custom args. Will that get parsed along? Show. I don't know. Okay. It was a good guess, but it's not coming up right away. The other thing I want to check is that metadata feature, that dictionary. Did that just go in the ether? Where did that go? Because when we looked at an email sending, this has this metadata thing. I know for a fact that I've seen some of this metadata. Let's check this. I don't know. Okay. Gonna log into SendGrid. I'm going to look at one of these emails that was sent and see if there's evidence of the metadata being attached in the sending side. So sorry, gotta switch this again, but SendGrid, going to the SendGrid page. I think I'm already authenticated, but I think it might show, well, the activity I'm gonna look at does include my email address, so I can't really show that. So what I'm staring at right now, well, is this going to help you? Okay, I'm logged into SendGrid. I'm going to click over here on the activity page. I think even this is fine. This isn't going to show anything yet. It's going to be like a search thing. I'm going to click this show all activity button, and it should show the emails that I've been sending out to my personal email address. There's a sidebar that comes up over here that has like the event history and attributes attached to the email. And that's where I think I'll be able to see if I have been successfully adding metadata, then it would show up there. That would be an indicator that the metadata attribute on the sending side works, but it may be also an indicator that it doesn't come back to the receive hook. So now I got to go back to this, and I'll keep using my words to describe things. I'm doing a search. We're showing all the activity. And we've got a handful of these things here at different times, and this one looks like it's the latest. I'm bringing up the email information, it's loading up all the sidebar, and I'm expanding on, aha, okay. So, oh man, I wish I could show this in some way. When I look at the email information, it says the to, which has my personal email, which is why I can't show you right now, but then it has all of those other attributes that we care about, including the API key, which I also can't show you. But there's a unique args section. And this unique args section has this anymail ID, which is the automatically generated UUID thing that we want. And it has the entry date and the metadata key and metadata value, the things that we stuffed in that metadata. So what that's telling me is the anymail ID was stuffed in that metadata attribute. The problem is it doesn't seem to have gone to the actual receive hook side, or at least we haven't seen where they put it. And we did inspect pretty much every aspect of that request that came in, because the ESP, the receiving side, is the ESP event. So the only extra stuff we have here on the event is the message. And the message is, presume, parsed out of the actual in the request that came in. And so we can only go from the request contents that's there. And the request content had a handful of headers, which weren't particularly useful, and that encoded response. So it's starting to look pretty dire in terms of what actually gets propagated along from my perspective. So let's see. Really running out of gas mentally. We've already looked through a lot of these attributes, and we've looked at the fields that were on the reply to or on the message itself, and none of them were really super useful. So I don't know that there's much there. So I think I'm at a point where I need to say, I'm going to admit defeat for the evening. I think we learned a lot, though. I learned a lot about SendGrid and the structure of the requests, and what actually gets sent over the wire and what comes back into AnyMail and all of this sort of stuff. Hopefully you learn some of that too. Where do we need to go from here? There's two outcomes that I see. One outcome is we figure out some way that actually does do some kind of correlation. And maybe there's a way to okay, if we get a, this is interesting perhaps. Maybe there is a way to do an API call that there's some kind of ID on the received hook, and all right, SendGrid, you didn't send me everything that I wanted, but I'm going to go try and look up the sending email from something and see if I can pull down the custom attributes. Let's write this down because I'm not going to remember this later. So here we are in the process email. Let's put it at the bottom here with a new section. Where are we at? We are trying to parse everything out of the receiver message in order to build the journal entry. Right? That's really what we're trying to do. But we seem to be missing data. The metadata that we attached does show up with the sent email, but doesn't appear to be in the WSGI request, which is the underlying data coming with the receive hook. Okay, so what are our options? Is there any mechanism to have data transferred? Maybe custom args? In the API request? Maybe propagating some header. That would be the best case, right? Because then we could actually pull it out, we could parse it, and so on. The next best case here is from the info in the receiver message, could we find an ID, do an API call to SendGrid, and pull the metadata actively? So it's like, so that's the admission of the receiver hook didn't send what we needed, but we have a belief that we can go look it up somehow. That would be less awesome, but okay, it'd be fine if we had to do that. All right, the final mode here is if it's impossible to connect the reply, and prompt emails via their metadata, via some metadata, we would have to go with the raw parsing route. That might mean changing the subject to be friendlier for parsing. So those are what I'm seeing as the three main paths to consider to actually complete this, close this loop. And I think those are the things that I will try and do some research between now and next week. I think I will be here next week to do another stream. So this is, I think, where we'll pick up. Rami, let me round this off with answering your question. What is my view about Cassandra for making social media platforms such as Meta, X, YouTube? That is an excellent question. I think well, start off with, I don't have a ton of experience with Cassandra. And by that, I mean almost zero. I know of it, but I don't remember much about it. And I think I might be confusing it in my head with other tools. So let me go read about it really quickly. So the keywords I'm seeing here is it's a NoSQL database. But that NoSQL part probably helps it distribute and scale. I don't know. I could see this being. I'm sure. Well, I got to believe what they say. At least what I saw in some of these, that a lot of companies use this, and I've heard of companies that use it. I'm afraid I just can't answer too much on how it works with the experience and all of that. Maybe it's amazing. Don't know. Trying to think of my company at work uses Cassandra or something. I think maybe they do, maybe we do, but I'm drawing a blank on what it is. So I think the fact that it is, if you have a well-known data model that you don't imagine, like this is my interpretation of NoSQL in general. So I'm generalizing now to NoSQL and not to, so this could apply to Mongo and all sorts of stuff. The benefit, the trade-off with NoSQL in the positive and negative is, the positive is like I can put anything in there and just treat it as like a blob storage, and I can, as long as that gives me a ton of flexibility. But if you're changing that data model and you're wanting to, like, let's pick on you said social media. So let's say you're making a post somewhere, and you add certain attributes to a post as your first version, and then somewhere along the way, you make a change to what you would want a post to include. And so you change your data model and you say, I've got some new fields on here now. Unless you're going to do some kind of data migration on the existing content, then your code now has to be flexible to account for both the old model that was missing some fields and the new model. And maybe that's fine. If you do that and you write that code, cool, it's happy. You might do that. You might accomplish that by versioning your data and having some kind of like tagging within the data itself to say, like, I'm a V1 version of a post, and because I'm V1, I have these fields. And if you encounter a V1 version of a post, this is what you do if you're missing that field, and you put in some kind of rules. And then the V2 version that has those fields, you just use them. So it takes a little bit more rigor in the authoring of code because of the NoSQL stuff, because of that flexibility. But that flexibility is pretty cool. It probably enables a lot of teams to go really fast. The counter to that, there would be the SQL model, which would force you to deal with it. Like if you add a new column to a table, you got to make some decision about, okay, I'm going and doing that data migration all at that point at which I create the new column on the table, and I have to decide how to populate that table with either some default value or backfill it based on whatever the column is supposed to represent. So it's a different trade-off set between a NoSQL versus a SQL option. NoSQL has other scaling benefits too because it can shard in interesting ways. So don't have too much to say with specific Cassandra experience though. All right, y'all. I think that's where I'm going to wrap it for the evening. Thank you for joining in. It was kind of fun to poke around, see how this worked out. We'll get there. We're getting closer and closer to actually being able to persist those entries. Where we're going beyond that is once the persistence works, then I can start using it as an actual user and talk about the experience and replace the existing tool that I'm using. Hopefully it's uneventful, where I'm just getting my prompts and I can get all the benefit out of that. There might be a little bit of custom work that I have to do in order to read in the file from the other system so that I have some interesting prompts. I've got hundreds and hundreds of entries from the other service. And it's at that point that we can start adding and expanding. The core loop will be there, but we still have a ways to go before we're there. I want to thank you all for joining in. Thank you all for the discussion as well. Do me a favor and give me a like here on YouTube, or leave some comments if you have a question. You can also join me on Discord. You can go to my site at mattlehman.com. There's a Discord button in the corner if you want to ask a question when I'm offline and not accessible in this live format. And thank you all for joining in, and I'll see you next time. Take care.